Hi everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Millennial Cynic with me, Sarah. I do hope you are keeping well. Today, I think we simply have to talk about the biggest issue of this past week or so, and that is Robert Troy and his property exploits, and the ongoing fallout from the revelations about his wheelings and dealings. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mr. Troy is a Fianna Fáil TD and is, as of recording this episode on the 24th of August, is still serving as Minister of State at the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment with social responsibility for trade promotion. So, why is Mr. Troy worth dedicating an entire episode to? Well, for the full story, I would recommend going to the source on this one, and that would be ontheditch.ie. The Ditch have really shown up mainstream journalism recently with the stories they have broken on the onboard Planala shit show and now this never-ending Troy story. In the interests of saving everyone's time and my own voice, I will just give the bullet points of the story with analysis afterwards. This story is evolving so fast it would make a Pokemon's head spin, and I cannot guarantee that more information will not have trickled out before I eventually launch this video. But as of recording, he is still a serving minister and has not yet resigned or been pushed. So, let's get to it. Troy, at 24 years old, bought a property from the Criminal Assets Bureau, rented it for 12 years, and then sold it to Westmeath County Council for a record fee of €230,000 when other similar properties in the area were fetching a price tag of up to about €200,000. He declared the rent, but not the sale, in the Dáil record. In May 2019, Troy bought a detached 4-bed house in Longford for €82,500. He bought it from Fianna Fáil councillor for Mullingar Kinnegad, Bill Collentine. He owned the property for 3 months before selling in August to Longford County Council for the princely sum of €163,000, almost 100% profit. Similar properties in the estate had sold for $135,000 to $144,000. He never declared the purchase nor the sale in the Dáil register. By his own admission, he owns 11 properties and rents out 9 of them, some of them through the Housing Assistance Payment Scheme, or HAP, and a couple through the Rental Accommodation Scheme, or ROSS. One of these properties in Dublin 7, a 1-bed apartment, is currently being let at the price tag of €1,550 a month, despite that price being 72% above HAP rates. He, as a minister with responsibility for trade and business regulation, did not declare a directorship he was a part of. He has been renting out a property which was not registered with the Residential Tenancies Board, a criminal offence in and of itself. There are now reports that a number of his properties in the same block in Dublin do not have the required fire safety certificates. Now, these are just a bullet point list of some of the main issues facing Robert Troy, or rather the main issues that have been revealed so far. It seems every day new information is released with new stories broken. So what can we learn from all of this? Well, quite a lot actually. So first thing to note is that Mr. Troy has apologised and corrected the Dáil record with a list as long as your arm. He said he was embarrassed by the whole affair, sorry for not giving the process the due diligence it deserved. He thought he got it right, but didn't. So a nice little apology there. Problem solved. Well, no, not even close, although I'm sure his party colleagues wish it was. And I'm also sure the Fine Gael members, An Taoiseach included, who stuck their necks out for him wished it was too. But this whole affair has thrown out some very serious questions that need answers, and not just by Robert Troy. Serious questions need to be asked of local authorities. Why did Longford County Council pay over and above the going rate for a property? Why did Westmeath County Council do the same for a record price this time? For a property that would appear was only bought for vehicular access to a site that was set for council development. Do the county and city councils in this country routinely offer over and above for properties? Or is it just to TDs, councillors, or otherwise connected individuals? Why are there no records of initial communications between Westmeath County Council and Robert Troy? Who approached who? This is one of the first things that needs to be thoroughly looked into. At worst, it reeks of corruption in my opinion. At best, it reeks of incompetence. Corruption due to possible inside information being used to gain a leg up. I mean, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it usually is in fact a duck. Or incompetence due to negligent spending of public money. And honestly, I don't know which is worse. Questions also need to be asked about why Robert Troy, a TD and councillor for so long, did not feel that he had to declare certain interests. And why has he issued contradictory statements over the past week or so? First, he claimed he forgot to declare a sale. Then a few days later, when the second property sale emerged, he claimed that the Standards in Public Office Commission, or SIPO, advised him that he did not need to declare the sale of a property to a public body. So which is it? That he forgot, or that he got advice and therefore didn't have to? Questions also need to be asked about why Robert Troy, a minister with responsibilities around business regulation and who was just last month cheerleading the creation of a new authority to crack down on white-collar crime, cannot seem to file appropriate returns. Why he seems to think that a declaration only applies to interests held on the 31st of December and not for the previous 12 months. Why he doesn't need to be fire safety compliant. Why he hadn't registered a tenancy with the RTB and then blamed his estate agent instead because, sure, why not pass the buck? You would think that someone with such responsibilities would be acutely aware of the need for transparency and accountability, and yet, here we are. A government minister once again feigning incompetence to get out of trouble. If he is so incompetent, he should resign with immediate effect, as he is clearly not fit for office. Oh, but don't worry, he did make sure to claim for his expenses. They must be easier forms to deal with, I guess. But there is a real whiff of Fianna Fáil here, and I can't help but draw comparisons with a certain Minister for Finance who didn't have a bank account. Questions need to be asked about how a 40-year-old man, a career politician, has amassed 11 properties. Questions need to be asked also of Robert Troy as to why he has voted in favour of increasing rental assistance payments when he himself, as a landlord with HAP tenants, would benefit. Why not recuse himself from the vote given his clear vested interest? Questions also need to be asked about how and why a Fianna Fáil TD bought a house for €82,500 from a Fianna Fáil councillor when said property had been advertised for sale for €69,500 and apparently in dire need of repairs and renovations. Why pay above asking for a house in such a state? Questions need to be asked about how the process of buying this property, renovating and repairing this property and selling the property on to Longford County Council for nearly double the price took only 3 months. Maybe Robert Troy would be better served putting his talents to use in the Department of Housing instead, as it certainly seems like he has the inside track on how to get a property back into circulation in record time. Questions must also be asked of SIPO, the Standards in Public Office Commission. They actually backed Troy's statement about not needing to declare a sale of property to a council by deciding to ignore dictionary definitions and pretend words don't mean what they actually mean. Under ethics legislation, TDs are required to declare contracts with public bodies for any sale of goods or services worth more than €6,500. Now, I don't know about you, but I would class a house as a good. According to Wikipedia, for example, in economics, goods are items that satisfy human wants and provide utility, for example, to a consumer making a purchase of a satisfying product. A common distinction is made between goods which are transferable and services which are not. End quote. And I can't believe I have to say it, but come on, a house is clearly a good, yet not according to SIPO. No. SIPO said, as property is neither a good nor a service, this provision does not apply to contracts for the sale of property to a minister of the government or a public body. In light of this, there is no obligation to disclose such contracts. What the actual fuck is that? A property is neither a good nor a service, and this is the Standards in Public Office Commission set up under ethics legislation. Seriously? I would say toothless, but that's by design. How on earth can SIPO ever say anything about anything or anyone again when they come out with this sort of tripe? A house is not a good. Then what is it then? Although I suppose given that a house is merely an impossible aspiration, a concept even, for so many of the citizens of this country, maybe that's where SIPO's minds were. Absolute madness and maddening all in one fell swoop. Another toothless regulator, another quango with no real purpose. Wonderful. Just what we need more of in this country. Questions too need to be asked of why it took so long for the mainstream media here in Ireland to jump on the bandwagon. Why is there no real investigative journalism left in this country outside of small independent outlets? Some seriously major scandals have been broken by the Ditch and other small outlets, while the big players are asleep at the wheel. Major questions need to be asked of all those ministers who have defended Troy and the general government response here. On Taoiseach Micheál Martin was curiously quiet when the story broke, leaving it to Antánaiste Leo Varadkar to come to the defence of his departmental colleague, with Varadkar telling reporters that Troy was top class and that he was completely satisfied with his actions. We also had Simon Harris echoing these sentiments while complimenting Troy on his admissions and intentions at the time to correct the Dáil record. Two Fine Gael politicians ardently supporting a Fianna Fáil minister. Isn't it all just rosy? What a time to be alive. We finally heard from Micheál Martin through a spokesperson the day after Troy corrected the record and issued a statement apologising, where he accepted the corrections and was satisfied with everything. In the days since, he has echoed this statement in person, saying that Troy has comprehensively addressed the issue in terms of the amendment to his Declaration of Interests, and as far as I am concerned, he is a very effective Minister of State and doing a good job in that respect. We have since heard other ministers and colleagues defending Troy in a similar vein. Nothing to see here. Move along now, please. Now, you might be thinking, well, of course they have to defend him. The coalition has already lost its majority and any more resignations, forced or otherwise, could cause the government to fall. That would certainly explain why Leo Varadkar was so quick to defend him. He is chomping at the bit to be Taoiseach again after all. However, they handily defeated the Sinn Féin motion of no confidence last time, so why would now be any different? I'm sure more deals could be struck with independents to keep that gravy train going. €101,000 a year plus expenses, don't you know? But there is another reason why Leo and others are defending him. Let he without sin cast the first stone. Serious questions need to be asked about just how many TDs, councillors and senators have used their connections, their past or present links to local authorities, their influence with regulatory bodies, to gain a leg up. How many have enriched themselves? How many are profiteering from the current rental crisis? In my humble opinion, the only reason for this defence of Troy is to cover their own collective arses, because so many of them are benefiting in similar ways. The only unique thing about Robert Troy is that he got caught. You just have to look at how many have since corrected the Dáil record since these revelations came to light to see that they are all at it. In my humble opinion, of course. Serious questions need to be asked of our governance. Why are SIPO pretending that a house is not a good and therefore a sale to the council does not have to be declared? Why are TDs and councillors even allowed to be landlords in the first place? And if that seems like it goes too far, then why are they allowed to sell any extra properties they do have to any local authority or government body? The only way a government body should gain ownership of a politician's property is by seizure, not through paying over the odds. Why are county councils allowed to make massive bids that exceed the market average for certain properties? How many times have they gone over and above the market value for properties that were owned by ordinary citizens with no political connections? I'd hazard a guess at none. But how many times have they gone over and above the market average for properties that were owned by politicians or otherwise connected individuals? If we had a greater amount of serious investigative journalists, perhaps the manpower would be there to dig deeper into all of this. Why are vested interests able to play the market? Why are politicians able to benefit from the housing crisis? This whole affair reeks of the hallmarks of the quote-unquote old Fianna Fáil. Cronyism and corruption abound. The Galway tent, the Ansbacher accounts, a Minister for Finance without a bank account, and now Robert Troy. When Sabina Higgins dared to ask for a path to peace in the Ukraine, government politicians and unelected senators climbed up on their imagined high horse and roundly condemned her. Condemned her for wanting peace and an end to war. I mean, how dare she want to end bloodshed, an end to war and an end to needless deaths? Because negotiation has never worked before. No, don't go thinking about the North, or any other war that ever ended for that matter. Good Lord above, the drivel these chancellors come out with when they think they can get one over on their government opposition, when they think they can get a receipt for being called out as failures for the housing disaster. Where are they now? All silent, all hiding, all terrified, in my opinion, that the gravy train might be coming to an abrupt end because one of their own, one of the elite, got caught. And the housing disaster is yet again at the heart of all of this. Politicians enriching themselves through playing the property market while an entire generation will never be able to own their own homes and will be perennial renters. Politicians taking the electorate for mugs and getting away with it. Absolutely shocking behaviour, and yet nothing but a pat on the back for Troy for owning up to some of the crap that has been trickling out about this story, all while ignoring the public anger, ignoring the blatant disregard for the rules, and ignoring shameless behaviour by a person who should be held to a higher standard. And if Robert Troy is to be believed that this is all just some embarrassing mix-up and he did not try to hide anything, then he should still go, because as I said, he is clearly incompetent. Incompetence and ignorance of the rules cannot continue to be the get-out-of-jail-free card for politicians. It should mean instant resignation. How can a person who can't file the necessary documents be trusted with drawing up policy and legislation? They can't and should be cut loose, as they are not fit for office. And if Troy hasn't done anything technically illegal, he should still resign, in my opinion. Just because a loophole is there doesn't mean it should be exploited. Just because something isn't technically criminal or illegal doesn't mean it's not wrong. And politicians should be held to a far higher standard in this regard. Yet they often aren't. Instead, ordinary people are the ones held to a far higher standard, and politicians get away with stuff that an ordinary person would be crucified for. How many politicians have their hand in the cookie jar here and are enriching themselves the same way Robert Troy is? How many are benefiting as a landlord during a rental crisis? How many are benefiting from flipping property during a housing crisis? This infuriating story simply serves to show up just how corrupt our government is and can be. From the laws to the regulators tasked with policing them to the politicians themselves, none are fit for purpose. Sweeping changes to our governance must happen in the wake of this disgusting debacle. TDs, senators and councillors, in my honest opinion, should not be allowed to be landlords. Neither should their spouses, for that matter. Unless this practice is thoroughly regulated in a completely transparent way that the public have access to, fat chance, they should not be allowed to own extra property to rent out. Why? Because this is a vested interest. Robert Troy, a landlord, a property speculator, has voted against motions in the Dáil to strengthen tenant rights. He has also voted in favour of increasing HAP rates. A vested interest voting on bills that have a direct effect on him and his interests. Disgusting. And you could argue that, okay, maybe let them be landlords or whatever, but simply abstain from votes that affect their vested interests. Okay, fine, except that would mean there'd be fuck all TDs actually voting on anything, since so many of them are landlords. TDs, senators and councillors should be held to a far higher standard. Their finances and assets should be public record with no room for hiding anything. Complete transparency and accountability. TDs are paid more than enough. Why the need for more? If you are in politics, you should be there for the good of the people, not the good of yourself. A TD is a public servant. If you are not there to serve the public and are instead there to serve yourself, you should not be there at all. Heads need to roll over this, and the longer it goes, the worse it gets. Robert Troy needs to go, if he hasn't already by the time this video launches. A truly independent investigation must be started to get to the bottom of all of this. Not declaring a rental to the RTB is a criminal offence for a start. Even if everything else he did was technically legal, it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it acceptable. And we still want an election. Thank you for joining me today for this infuriating topic. If you've enjoyed my take on all of this, then please do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more from me. I'm also on Twitter for instant reactions to the news of the day. I'm sure I will see you all soon with more frustrating stories that are down to poor governance. So until next time, slán go fóill.